Welcome from the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Livestock Systems. This brief presentation will outline our approach to human and institutional capacity development as a cross-cutting theme in the Livestock Lab's projects. First, let's briefly explore how we are using the terms related to capacity development. The term capacity development refers to the process whereby people, organizations, and society as a whole unleash, strengthen, create, adapt, and maintain capacity, or an ability to manage their affairs over time. This can refer to technical or functional capacities. For example, a technical capacity within a livestock system might include the ability of an individual to vaccinate livestock or test for disease. A functional capacity within a livestock system might include the ability of an individual to effectively collaborate or communicate with local farmers. The second term we use is human capacity development. This term refers to individuals within a livestock system and often specifically refers to the technical and functional capacities that individuals need to effectively perform their duties. The third term we use is institutional capacity development. This can be misleading, as some use the term institution to refer to organizations such as research organizations, universities, or government agencies. Others use the term institution to refer to societal institutions, such as gender norms and culture. For the purposes of this presentation, we will instead use the term organizational capacity development for clarity. Organizational capacity development refers to the collective capability of members or individuals to achieve their organization's goals. Strengthening organizational capacities consists of improving the overall functioning and performance of an organization, as well as strengthening relationships across organizations. It often is reflected in changes to organizational mandates, systems, processes, or priorities. In a livestock system, this may include the mechanisms by which organizations collaborate, incentives to participate in research, and the outreach strategy that an organization is using to encourage adoption of a technology. The final term we use is enabling environments. This term refers to norms, customs, laws, regulations, policies, international trade agreements, and public infrastructure. In a livestock system, this may be as diverse as the gender norms that influence who adopts a technology and for what purpose, to the policies that dictate funding, processes, and laws. The reason it is important to have a clear understanding of these terms is that the Livestock Lab has adopted a new model for capacity development that uses a systems approach to understanding and strengthening livestock research and education. The new model of capacity development moves beyond training-only approaches to capacity development, which typically focus on technical skills and occasionally, though rarely, focuses on other skills such as communication, interpersonal skills, and attitude and behavior change. These approaches range from short-term technical training to long-term degree training, but these capacity development efforts exist independently of the organizational enabling environment influences. These training efforts may lead to improved human capacity, but may not translate directly to an individual's performance due to these other issues. One example of a training-only approach to capacity development occurred on a large development grant in agricultural innovation systems. This training program was intended to build the capacity of researchers and educators in a low middle-income country who were working in sustainable agricultural systems. In this effort, the sponsoring development agency provided transportation, lodging, food, and travel expenses for 20 researchers and educators to spend 3 weeks in Europe for intensive training in science and technology. These researchers and educators then returned to their home country where little to none of this training was implemented. Why did this occur? Because the training-only approach did not take the enabling environment into consideration. In this situation, there exists a cultural norm of seniority in which opportunities for training go to the highest level personnel first. The result of this oversight was that all of the participants were administration who did not conduct research or teaching, or who were within a few years of mandatory retirement. Those from the organizations who did actively engage in research and teaching were not given the opportunity to attend the training in the first place. If this had been taken into consideration when identifying the capacity development needs of the organization, the development agency could have potentially required a quota of junior and senior personnel. Our approach to capacity development moves beyond the training-only approach to include an analysis of the organizational capacities. This may include support systems, incentives, processes and procedures, the organization's plans and strategies, and how these capacities may influence the ability of the individual to both improve their own capacities and to fully perform within the organization. We also include an analysis of the enabling environment to understand external factors such as culture, norms such as gender, policies, and power dynamics. In this sense, we are looking at the rules of the game and how formal and informal systems influence both the organization and the individual. Taken together, the individual, organizational, and enabling environment analyses paint a more dynamic picture of the actual capacity development gaps within a livestock system. Now let's look at a practical example of this. First, let's look at a typical capacity development effort using the example of a need to develop the capacity of the goat sector of a low-middle income country. In this scenario, a development effort focuses on a training-only focused solution in which an organization sends a young male researcher to attend technical training that will provide him with the skills necessary to conduct quality research on goat production. However, when returning from the training, it becomes evident that there are no incentive systems for a junior faculty member to participate in research. Their time is spent entirely on teaching, and there is no mechanism for him to reallocate his time to other activities within the research and service mandates. There is also no formalized strategy to support junior faculty in conducting research. In addition, the trainers did not consider the enabling environment in which goats are primarily raised by women, and cultural norms make it a challenge for men to work with female farmers in the rural areas. In addition, there are few mechanisms for transparency, and informal societal norms and politics promote favoritism within the organization. The junior male faculty member supports the political party that is not currently in power and is passed over for research support. While the young researcher may have built their capacity regarding the skills needed to conduct research in the goat sector, there is no organizational support in a hostile environment. As such, it is unlikely that the researcher will be able to effectively use his new skills, and the capacity development effort will ultimately fail. Now let's look at this scenario again, but from a systems perspective. First, the development agency partner conducts an analysis of the human and organizational capacity gaps and the constraints in the enabling environment. This leads to an understanding that beyond the capacities of the individual researcher, there are issues within the organization that must be addressed, and all of the capacity development efforts must consider constraints regarding gender and informal societal norms. This leads to multiple capacity development efforts, including training to develop the skills of the researcher, assistance in developing and implementing merit-based evaluation systems for promotion, assistance in developing and implementing systems to adapt or release faculty time, and assisting in developing and implementing systems of transparency, such as a review board with clear criteria for allocation of research support funds. When taking the individual, organization, and environment into consideration and providing appropriate capacity development interventions at each of these levels, the capacity development is likely to succeed. The next few slides provide an example of what a gap analysis looks like and how this can strengthen capacity development efforts. In this first look, we see a business-as-usual approach focusing on training needs. Typically, when capacity development needs are identified, they focus on technical skills. In this example, our gap analysis is conducted with a university partner who conducts research, teaching, and extension as part of their mandate. If focusing only on technical skills, we see laboratory skills, research skills, and practical skills, such as grant writing, come to the forefront. In a business-as-usual approach, training would only focus on these three areas. However, our gap analysis showed that there are other important issues at the human capacity development level. For example, the research focus of the university does not directly involve the community or a consideration of their needs. It has not brought into focus on animal source foods, and many within the university feel like they are too focused on old ways of conducting research, meaning that the researchers are lacking modern research design and method skills. These issues also directly tie to teaching practice and community outreach, where there are disconnects between skills and demands. At the organizational level, we see several issues that put additional pressure on the human capacities. The lack of modernized research focus makes it difficult for the university to be competitive for international grants. The internal research funding is lacking in a transparent process to allocate funds. This often means that senior faculty receive these funds, which, coupled with the individual capacity gaps, reinforces the old way of conducting research. The teaching and extension mandate, which is lacking at the individual level, is negatively reinforced by other issues. For example, students conduct studies in the nearby communities, but never return to the communities to provide the results. For example, one goat farmer commented that dozens of students have taken blood samples from his goats, but he has never seen the results of any of these tests. This gap is directly related to the lack of an overall outreach strategy, which is leading to weak linkages to and communication with the community, particularly smaller farms and cooperatives. Many of the human and organizational capacity issues are reflective of the enabling environment. For example, at this university, research and extension have recently been added to their mandate along with teaching. However, the allocation of funds from the government has not changed in order to support this new mandate. As such, labs, libraries, research funding, and incentive systems are significantly lacking. So, how does this influence capacity development efforts? It would be very challenging to change all of these issues within a subaward or smaller project. However, consider the issue of who attends training. Simply knowing that there are cultural norms that influence the process for who is selected for training means that this can be considered in how capacity development efforts are framed, such as by requiring quotas of junior and senior faculty. Similarly, frustrations over the extension and outreach efforts can be mitigated by first working with the university to develop an outreach strategy that includes strengthening linkages to the community. This is more sustainable in the long term, as building the capacity at the organizational level will allow the local organization, in this case the university, to better conduct training at the community level independent of a development partner organization. In conclusion, the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Livestock Systems Human and Institutional Capacity Development team suggests that all capacity development efforts take a systems approach. This means looking at human technical needs in the context of the organization and the enabling environment. This approach will lead to stronger, more sustainable, and more effective capacity development outcomes.